Hey guys, welcome back to the Lila Rose podcast. Today we're going to talk about a new study that came out. Gen Z wants less sex, more platonic relationships in TV and movies. New study shows. Fascinating stuff coming out of our Gen Zers, 10-year-olds to 24-year-olds, and what they really want when they look at entertainment. I think we have a lot to learn from the survey. We're also going to talk about the hit show Friends and the phenomenon that it was and its impact over generations, as well as some representations in media that are actually doing a good job, kind of doing what Friends didn't do, but what we want to see in media, representing friendship and romance well without the sex scenes. All this and more on this episode of the Lila Rose podcast. Our sponsor today is Good Ranchers. Good Ranchers is America's #1 meat, poultry, fish, and pork company. You're going to love Good Ranchers because all of the meat is sourced directly from American ranchers. So this is food from the United States. Did you know that when you go to the grocery store, 90% of the product is actually not from the USA. It's from a source that's usually unclear to the purchaser. There's a reason why grocery store meat is often such poor quality. This is why you're going to love Good Ranchers. Good Ranchers is some of the best steaks, some of the best pork chops, some of the best chicken breasts, some of the best meat that you will find anywhere. Check out goodranchers.com today. That's goodranchers.com today. You can get a subscription service and you can actually get up to $500 off in free product when you sign up today using the code Lila at checkout for $15 off your order plus up to $500 in free product. Find out why Good Ranchers is America's #1 meat company. All right, so as you guys know, I am very passionate about restoring, reclaiming media, entertainment media, news media, digital media. That's a lot of my background with my work at Live Action, my pro-life organization. We're the digital leader for the pro-life global movement to show the truth about human life and about abortion. And that's the project behind this podcast and other media projects that we are doing. And the whole idea here is media is extremely powerful. We all know this. You're listening to a podcast right now or you're watching it on YouTube. Media is really, really powerful. Listening to music is really powerful. It shapes us. Watching films are really powerful. It shapes us. I have a friend, as an example, who loved the show Friends, and she would watch it frequently. She was a big fan. And I can understand why. You know, Friends obviously has been a phenomenon over the last couple decades, especially in the 90s when it first showed up. You had these multiple main characters. You followed them. They were friends. And so you built this camaraderie with these super likable characters. But the part that was, I think, the poison pill with Friends was that they slept together. And there wasn't a lot of morality around them sleeping together. It didn't really mean much. Sex did not mean a lot. And in fact, the friends could sleep together, not want to sleep together after that, not want to be together even romantically, and then still be friends, right? That was kind of the ongoing message of the show, one of the messages of the show. Obviously, it's super tragic that Matthew Perry has recently died, one of the beloved characters from Friends. May he rest in peace. And so this is not about him personally, but I do think the show has a lot to do with this new study out about Gen Z that I've already referenced. So we're going to dive into that more in a moment. But back to Friends. What kind of message does it communicate when you have friends who see sex as just something that you might do together that maybe has some romantic connotation, but that it's really not that important? It's really not sacred. It certainly doesn't have to belong within marriage. It doesn't have to be open to life and can create new life, but that it's really something almost recreational or romantic that you do, like going on a date. That is an extreme cheapening of sex. And I would argue that's most media today. Most media today has that gratuitous sex scene. A lot of media today has that romantic connotation they want to put in there with sex as a core part of it. So doing media today, films, TV shows, doing it today with any kind of romantic plotline without sex is extremely rare. It's rare to see that. And think about Gen Zers. Gen Zers are teenagers. They're the post-Friends generation. So like Millennials, I guess, and Gen Xers grew up with Friends. Today, Gen Zers are, decades past Friends, but they grew up with all the other craziness that is in a lot of media today. And how are they responding to that? Well, this new study shows, it was a survey of over 1,500 adolescents, and the new study shows that Gen Z actually wants less sex, surprise, surprise, less sex in media and more platonic relationships instead in TV and movies. So let's dive into more what this study found. So the study was released by UCLA. That's my alma mater. Shout out to UCLA, Teens and Screen Study, conducted by the Center for Scholars and Storytellers. And it was done in August. And they surveyed 1,500 adolescents between the ages of 10 and 24. So this is your Gen Zer classic group. And they found that of these kids, they wanted to see less gratuitous sex in movies and television and more friendship instead. It says, as demonstrated in this report, adolescents have grown tired of stereotypical, heteronormative storytelling that valorizes romantic and sexual relationships, especially ones that are toxic. By the way, think Twilight. We've talked about Twilight on the podcast before. Great example of total toxic relationships. Just one example, by the way. And that Gen Z are looking for more representations of friendship, which is a core aspect of adolescence and social well-being. By the way, what should kids between the ages of 10 and early 20s be most interested in? What should they be most invested in when it comes to their relationships? Family and friends. I'm not a big believer in dating as a very young kid or as a teen. I think, yes, I'm not saying it's wrong to date as a teen, but if your world revolves around your romantic relationships as a very young person, as an adolescent, as a young teen, even as someone who's, 21 years old, I think that can be a room for disaster. I think that it's so important that those years are used to build strong friendships and strong family ties with your family, if at all possible. And so that's not to say that you can't get married when you're 21. That's not to say that it's not good for some people to get married young. Actually, I'm in full support. If you have the maturity and you know what marriage is and you have good formation, I'm all for actually young marriage. If you're blessed to meet, your future spouse and you choose that with them. But your focus still should be on friendship. Even in that case, you should still be focused on building strong friendships with other people. So Gen Z, I think, is hungry for something that we all need, and they're hungry for something that typically is not represented as important in media today. And so they're literally telling the UCLA surveyors, we want more friendship. We are starving for friendship, and we're kind of turned off by sex. Now, I do think that one of the reasons they're turned off by, I think here, sex and romance are being used interchangeably, is that we have sexualized romance in a way that has made it objectifying and gratuitous and pornographic. Meaning, we now put sex out in a movie instead of remembering that sex actually belongs in a marriage, okay? Sex doesn't belong in movies, period, or TV shows. Romance does. Beautiful romantic storylines do. But sex belongs in the privacy of a married couple's love, not to be paraded on screen for anybody. And I think deep down, people kind of sense this, and deep down there's a discomfort with it. And that's why Gen Z is sending this message loud and clear. I want to get into this more, though, what they said next, what these findings were. It says, respondents also revealed that they're not interested in watching characters who aren't compatible pair off only to fight and break up over and over again. So I think the drama of kind of toxic relationships, breakups, get back together, breakups, get back together, is a turnoff to Gen Z. It says the stereotype of how romantic relationships are included and often feel unnatural, forced, or toxic ranked 4 out of the top 10 most disliked stereotypes, the study showed, noting that other annoying tropes included relationships being necessary to being happy, male and female leads always having to end up together romantically, love triangles, and more. In general, 44.3% of those surveyed felt that romance in media is overused, and get this, 47.5% of Gen Zers noted that, quote, sex is unnecessary for the plot of most TV shows and movies. Sex is unnecessary. We don't need you to put in the sex scene. I have actually several friends who work in Hollywood and in big studios, and I've heard horror stories. One friend telling me about how He was a basically producer of a show. So he was responsible for, at the very high level, getting it funded. And he had his clear, he was clear with the people involved with the show that, hey, I don't want sex in this show. I am a person of faith, and I don't think sex scenes belong in this, and it doesn't need a sex scene. So I need your commitment that we're not going to have a sex scene. Well, it goes to shoot. They're shooting the film. It's all going well. And then director decides, okay, we want this actor. We're going to pull in a random actor. It's like a side plot so that the lead has random sex with some like secretary. And they film it. And the producer doesn't find out, because this was like word of mouth. Like, he said this to the team, but he didn't like have it in a contract. Like, you can't include this. And so he finds out down the line. He's like, what is this? Like, you guys, I do not approve of this. And like, tough, this is what the director insists on. And this is what we think. And, at this point, the money was already in, the contracts were already signed, and he didn't have this in writing or anything. And so it ended up being in the film. But it was totally gratuitous. It was completely annoying. And it was unethical. It didn't need to be there. And it doesn't ever need to be there. But that's common, right? It's common because I think people think, okay, well, sex sells. We need to have that in there because people love sex and they just want some sex scene in their movie. Well, the reality is, yeah, if you're a porn addict, you're going to want to watch sex a lot. But your everyday person, including your young person, is not going into the movie theater saying, I hope there's a sex scene today. They're going to the movie theater because they're trying to enjoy some time with their friends or family and watch something entertaining, right? And maybe uplifting even, or informative. And if it's a Friday night and they're kicking their feet back and they're like, hey, I want to watch a fun movie, they're like, oh God, I hope it has a sex scene in it. So I think even Hollywood has missed the mark here in discerning what people actually want and are looking for. And they've become so used to hypersexualization that they're constantly throwing it in there. Game of Thrones is another example. I know some good people of faith are like, it's such an amazing show and the storytelling and like the production value, but like, oh my goodness, why all of this gratuitous sex and rape and brutality everywhere? Can you create it without it? You can still make romance and drama, and you can even show, the rawness of like a war without gratuitous violence, and certainly without gratuitous sex. I think any sex in a film is gratuitous, by the way. I don't think there's a way to have a sex scene in a moral way. I think you can definitely imply, like if it's a married couple going to bed, or if it's a story about a hookup that happened, you can definitely imply these people had sex without showing any of it and, completely eliminating the porn from the film. Our sponsor today is Carly Jean Los Angeles. Carly Jean Los Angeles are cute and fashion-forward and classic clothes for the everyday woman. So you're going to find capsule clothing so that when you wake up in the morning, if you order a few pieces from Carly Jean, you have several different outfits that you can choose to wear where you're comfortable, where you look classic, but you also look chic. Check out carlyjeanlosangeles.com today, and you can use the code Lila30 at checkout for 30% off your order. This is a special deal for the month of November only. So if you're shopping at carlyjeanlosangeles.com today, you can use the code Lila30 at checkout for a full 30% off your order. So I think Gen Z is onto something here. We can learn from our youngers here. I'm a millennial, and I'm a fan of Gen Z. I think they're the internet generation more so than millennials. They grew up with a smartphone. It's the rare 13-year-old that doesn't have a smartphone today. When I was 13, I think I had a flip phone. There weren't smartphones yet. That was like a few years later. So I was spared. But I really empathize with what Gen Zers deal with, because it's not just TV and it's not just movies. It's social media. Think about that. Think about the explicit sexualization and the constant objectifying that's happening on Instagram, on TikTok, of course, OnlyFans, pornography. It's everywhere. That's why studies say that the average age of exposure to pornography for a male specifically is like 8 or 9 years old. 8 or 9 years old is your average age that most kids, boys and girls, by the way, but boys are impacted even more by pornography, but girls are increasingly impacted by it. But it's like 8 or 9 years old that they're exposed to pornography from what? Media, digital media, entertainment media. Mostly it's digital media. It's through the phone, it's through the laptop, it's through the iPad, it's pornography. But you can run into pornography on Twitter. You can run into pornography on Instagram. You can run into pornography on, any number of websites almost inadvertently. So Gen Z is done with it. I mean, they're tired of it. And they're hungry for something much more meaningful, for something deeper, which is true shared connection with another human being where you value the other person for who they are and you have shared goals, shared activities, shared values. Friendship. What is the definition of friendship? There's a few different definitions. So the philosopher Aristotle describes friendship as reciprocated goodwill. So it's wanting the good of the other and sharing that with another person. And that the source of the goodwill differentiates a perfect friendship from two imperfect forms of friendship. So with true friendship, friends love each other for their own sake. They're not loving the other person for use, like what you can give me or how you make me feel, but they truly care about the person for their own sake. There's another great quote from C.S. Lewis, the great writer and Christian thinker, who says that friendship arises out of mere companionship when two or more of the companions discover that they have in common some insight or interest or even taste which the others do not share and which, till that moment, each believed to be his own unique treasure. The typical expression of opening friendship would be something like, "What? You too? I thought I was the only one." It is when two such persons discover one another, when, whether with immense difficulties or semi-articulate fumblings, they share their vision, it is then that friendship is born. And then he goes on to clarify or qualify this more, kind of more along the Aristotelian lens of friendship, which is wanting goodwill for the other. He says, true friendship is the least jealous of loves. True friends delight to be joined by a third and three by a fourth if only the newcomer is qualified to become a real friend. In this, friendship exhibits a glorious nearness by resemblance to heaven itself, where the very multitude of the blessed increases the fruition which each has of God. So there's a few things going on here, but some core principles is there's goodwill. You want the good of the other, and you share that with the other. You're not seeking relationship with the other for some selfish end. Another aspect that C.S. Lewis is speaking to here is that there's a shared delight, a shared view, a shared value of something that the two enjoy together, and they're affirming in the other person, and it's being affirmed in them. And that he also has this note about jealousy, which is really interesting, that friendship is not about hiding or taking the special thing that they love, that ideal that they share, that love of that literature that they share, that shared experience that they have, but that it's something that's open to including more people in that joy that they have that they're sharing. So these are the things, right? These are the things that at a deep level, I think, are what it means to be human. And often these things are missing in media. Now, I want to go back to the show Friends for a moment, because I think the special toxicity of that show is that you have friends, it's called friends, who share experiences, but you put the poison pill in there of sex as this kind of shared experience even, and shared thing that they even banter about and talk about, when sex is something not to be shared in a group of friends. Sex is reserved for that one friendship that is unique among all friendships, which is the friendship of a man and a wife, a woman and a man, who have declared marriage and are married to each other publicly. They've declared it and they're married to each other, and that's an exclusive, lifelong, faithful bond that they are going to have with each other, open to life. And so that's where sex belongs. That's what sex is designed for. So, back to Gen Z, I think that the reason that Gen Z is sort of combining here in the survey romance and sex, it's because we've brainwashed Gen Z with media like Friends that romance is sex, that, dating includes sex, that having a boyfriend means you have sex. And that's just not true. It doesn't need to be that way. Obviously, some people are doing that. Many people do that, but that's not helpful or healthy. It's not the moral way. So I think there's a beautiful opportunity here to obviously celebrate and patronize and create media that does a good job of representing friendship, and that also does a good job of representing true romance. So are there good shows today? Are there good movies today that actually show romance without the porn, basically? Romance without sex. And yeah, there are. And I want to talk about that a little bit. So there's a very famous, actually, it was a TV series and it has been a movie and it's very famous. Do you guys know what I'm about to say? If you're a woman listening, it starts with P and the other word in the title is an A and then it starts with an A and then the last word starts with P. Okay, Pride and Prejudice. If you're a guy listening, you may have seen this because you were asked to watch it by a significant other or a sister. But Pride and Prejudice has been a phenomenon that I think rivals a show like Friends. People joke about, what do men think about the Roman Empire? Have you guys seen that meme? You know, how often do men think about the Roman Empire? And all these men on TikTok are saying, actually, every day, once a week. I asked my husband, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? He's like, yeah, every few days. Like, wow. How often do women think about Pride and Prejudice? I mean, not all women, but I do think Pride and Prejudice is one of those classic, iconic stories that's both an amazing novel and has been really well represented, whether it's the BBC drama or the one with Keira Knightley, has been really well represented in media. And what is missing from both the BBC drama and from the Keira Knightley adaptation of Pride and Prejudice? What's missing from it that they could have put in? Sex scene. Of course, there's no sex scene. There's no sex scene because the romance that they shared, that Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth shared, did not include sex before marriage. It included longing and desire, but it also didn't include lust. It wasn't like, oh, I'm so lustful after you, I'm going to, take you before our time because I'm so lustful of you. That was not their story. There wasn't that toxicity of, I want to use you. Now, they had some drama, but it was drama where they were forming their characters. And that's what's called Pride and Prejudice, right? They had prejudices and pride that they had to overcome for them to love each other. And they did overcome their pride and their prejudices, and they did find true love where they willed the good of the other. They had this real friendship, and they wanted to truly love one another. That's a great love story. That's why I think people pretty universally, many people love Pride and Prejudice, and it's going to stand the test of time. It gets it right. It gets right what is a good love story. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that are clips of Pride and Prejudice. I think both the BBC version and the Keira Knightley version. And there's one I think that I remember showing up in my feed that said something like the sexual tension between Keira Knightley and Darcy, between Elizabeth Bennet and Darcy. And obviously they're not having sex, but you see the desire they have for each other. And I think there's something really powerful about that because we've forgotten, I think, that romance involves longing, but longing that is only fully fulfilled when it's in the right context. And unfortunately, in a lot of media, it's fulfilled in the wrong context. You just hop into bed together. It's not treated as sacred. You're saying something with your body, like you're all in with your body. I'm going to literally share my body with you, the most intimate part of me, but I'm not going to share my commitment with you. I'm not going to get married to you. I'm just sharing my body. Obviously, that's not real love. And you lose the mystery and I think the true deepest drama of a romance by jumping into bed. I do think that. But it's so interesting to watch these videos or to have these videos on YouTube that people love to see because you're seeing the longing that they have for each other. Now, they call it sexual tension. I think that's okay to kind of use that terminology because there's certainly sexual desire there. But I don't think in the video, or certainly not in the novel, Darcy is like undressing Elizabeth and trying to arouse himself in that moment. He's just very much moved by her and desirous of her. And that is a very key difference, right? There's a difference between desiring someone, being romantically attracted to someone, longing for someone, and then actively objectifying them in your mind so that you can have a sexual reaction to them. That distinction, among many other distinctions about sex and love and romance and marriage, is lost in most media today. But you still got it in Pride and Prejudice. So yeah, I don't mean to be fangirling too hard on Pride and Prejudice. I really like it. I think it's a great show. It's an example of romance and friendship done well. And I think content like that, with maybe different storylines, and doesn't have to be set in, this Victorian era, but content like that is what Gen Z ultimately is craving. EveryLife.com is America's pro-life baby products company. You can find great baby products for your little one or your loved one's little one at EveryLife.com. EveryLife.com is highest quality diapers and wipes that are ethically sourced, and most importantly, besides the great design and the ethical sourcing and the great organic materials, most importantly, EveryLife.com shares your values and is America's only pro-life diaper company. So check out EveryLife.com today and use the code Lila10 at checkout for 10% off your order. That's EveryLife.com. Another show that is classic and iconic, and it's more than a show, it's an amazing set of books, is Lord of the Rings. Yes, as a kid, Lord of the Rings was read to me by my father. Thank you, Dad. He started with The Hobbit, and it was just an awesome creative journey that we went on. It really inspired us. It opened our imaginations. And then there have been some really epic films made of Lord of the Rings. There was some great cartoons, but there's obviously the great live action series. Lord of the Rings is not as much of a love story as it is a hero's journey, and the hero has friends. So Sam and Frodo are friends, like the friends that are with each other through thick and thin and care deeply about each other and have a shared goal together and helping save Middle-earth. I mean, they're wonderful friends, and there's so many friends all throughout the beautiful story of Lord of the Rings. So why do people love it? Why has it passed the test of time? Why do people of all ages love it? Because Lord of the Rings is about friendship. Lord of the Rings is about love. There are love stories, but Lord of the Rings, both the stories and the books and the movies, don't have gratuitous sex scenes. Like, you don't have that in there. And guess what? You don't need it. Of course you don't need it. So well done, J.R.R. Tolkien, of course, mastermind, brilliant mastermind that you are. And well done those that created adaptations of his work to really capture the heart of his work, which are these epic hero journeys and friendship stories about heroism, ultimately, and goodwill and sacrificing oneself for the good of others. I have to also mention Snow White. Okay, this has been blowing up online because Snow White is being made into a live action adaptation by Disney. They had this very classic, beautiful cartoon version that I watched as a young girl. I remember, I think, enjoying it. I mean, the dwarves were cute. Snow White seemed one-dimensional to me, I will be honest, when I watched the cartoon growing up, and the witch was scary. Yeah, she was definitely scary to me as a little girl, but it was very charming. It's the classic Grimm's fairy tale about, this beautiful princess who has friends, the dwarves, who want to kind of protect her, and they're very likable and lovable. And then there's obviously the bad guy, the evil witch or whatever, and the apple, and the whole story about temptation and love and finding in the end true love and the prince. Okay, so what is Disney doing now? It's been in the news a lot, but Disney was making an adaptation live action, and they were going to scrap the dwarves, I guess, and their main actor, who they'd chosen to be Snow White, Rachel Ziegler, was going around and, pre-press touring about the movie. Things like, we're not going to have a prince in it, and he's a stalker. And so, she doesn't need a man. And I think, if I could guess, Disney is trying to listen maybe to Gen Z saying, we don't want sex, we want friendship. But what Disney is not realizing is that doesn't mean we don't want love. And it doesn't mean we don't want a happily ever after with a Prince Charming for many people. Not everyone's called to that, but many people. And it certainly doesn't mean you should blow up a classic Grimm's fairy tale and insert random new narratives. But it means that we don't want gratuitous sex scenes, okay? So you can recreate a live action version of Snow White that is beautiful, that shows the friendship with the dwarves, that shows the good and evil, that shows Snow White and her love story with the prince. And you can do that without, obviously, a sex scene. I think that's more what Gen Z doesn't want here. And you don't have to disparage love stories. You don't have to do that in the process. So I think if you miss the message of Gen Z here, I could see why you would, okay, we're going to create a woke-ish Snow White with Rachel Ziegler calling the prince a stalker. Because in that mentality, like, any romance is toxic, and you can't have a show about friendship if there's romance. I mean, I can see that really limited view because you're trying to respond to where the culture's at. But I think they completely missed the mark. And obviously, I think they've shot themselves in the foot because it sounds like they're backpedaling on some of that stuff now. And of course, our friends at the Daily Wire, looks like they've announced the creation of their version of Snow White, which will be more true to the story, which sounds great. But the bottom line here is get rid of the gratuitous sex. Don't play around with toxic relationships on screen just for fun and drama. Tell good love stories and show true epic friendship. I think that's going to be the recipe for success. So, what's the practical application here? If we believe this stuff that I'm talking about, I do not think we should patronize shows or movies that have gratuitous sex. I don't think we should do it. I think it's just feeding the beast. And yeah, I do think, what's one, me not going to the, movie theater, me not purchasing that video, online or whatever. I don't know. I think it does make a difference. Netflix, I still am not subscribed to Netflix because of the whole cutie scandal. I don't know if you guys remember that. I think it was 2 years ago now, but Netflix ran this film. It was made by, I think, a French director called Cuties. And it basically was a bunch of sexual imagery of preteen girls dancing sexually. And they even had that as the cover art for the film. And they kind of presented it as like, oh, this is an interesting, en vogue, independent film. This is so cool. Cuties is so cool. It's about the story of the preteen experience. And they're overtly sexualizing the actors in the film, who are preteen girls that they're having dress up sexually and do sexual moves. And they're also sexualizing young girls in general for a large audience that would be watching objectification happen in front of them, like softcore porn. So anyways, when Netflix did that, I'm like, I'm not going to accept child pornography on your platform and still pay you guys $7.99 a month. So we unsubscribed from Netflix. Yeah, a couple times it's been annoying because there's like a show that comes out. It's like, it would be great to see that show. But I do think finding lines in the sand to draw, that is a good thing for us to do, generally speaking. And we should use our purchase power to patronize media that is good and not patronize media that is bad. And also, don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to share opinions about, how stupid gratuitous sex is in movies. And if you're with a group of friends and they want to watch some movie with gratuitous sex in it, say, I don't want to watch that, or we're going to fast forward that scene because I don't want to be sitting here while there's porn playing on the screen. It's not what I want. Gen Z may be more courageous than you because they're literally telling the UCLA surveyor, we don't want this. So tell your friends or your family, whoever you're with, I don't want to watch this. I'm sorry. Let's pick something else, or we're fast forwarding that scene at minimum. So I would just say be more bold. Be more bold with calling a spade a spade. It doesn't mean you're a prude. It doesn't mean that you don't appreciate art and film and drama. It means that you actually really appreciate love and friendship and sex in its right context, and that you want good art. And good art doesn't use sex scenes to try to sell objectification to the masses while they have the rest of their plot over here. That's not good art. That's actually really, really bad art. And Gen Z knows. So thank you, Gen Z, for your honesty in this survey. And let's be part of the movement to be choosy about what we consume and patronize. And hey, if you're into creating media, go all in. I think we need more artists. We need more directors and more writers and more musicians. And we need more people in the arts and in entertainment and in media to create a new renaissance of beautiful, good, and true content that can actually help people laugh and live. As always, thank you for listening to this episode of the Lila Rose podcast. Hope you liked it. Thanks for letting me rant a little bit about what I'm passionate about. We will be back next time with a really great episode with Louise Perry on the sexual revolution. So I'm looking forward to that. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening or watching, on YouTube or on podcast app. And if you're on the podcast app, don't forget to give us 5 stars and leave us a review. That helps the podcast reach more people. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time.